usually they're, even though it's pausing, we're live. We're live, even though it looks weird. We're live. We're live. Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Freedom Friday. The power of the invisible. I'm so excited to be here with, there we are again. Woo! We're back. We made it back.
Invisible. That was good. All right. This will be fun.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to be here with Paula Lord today. And before I let her launch, I just want to speak to something that was coming up as we were talking before we began. When I, too low frame per second, I don't know what that means, but I know we're still live, so we're just going to go with the flow, right? We're in the invisible realm right now. So when I pause to think about this concept of the invisible versus the visible, what I really realized is like, oh wow, everything I practice now is the invisible. Everything I practice is about the invisible level. So when I was in traditional Western medicine, of course, evidence-based everything. And we use all these different kinds of studies of imaging in order to get that visible understanding. You know, we have this certain framework that helps us to visibly understand what we see happening in the body, you know, again, whether we're using blood work or MRIs or x-rays or examination techniques, it's all about connecting into that visible level. And then there are those things that we can't explain, which is pretty much the majority of medicine. I don't know why all these things are happening at the same time. And that's really what launched me to take this deep dive into, okay, there's something else there. Because I could experience it. I was experiencing it within myself. I didn't know quite what that was. And that began this whole journey into the invisible side, which really isn't invisible when you start looking with different eyes. And that goes to part of my little preamble when I was talking about this. Most of what we experience in reality is happening at the invisible level. That doesn't mean it's any less real, and it's the foundation for the visible. So what I'm holding in my hand right here, let's see if you guys can see it with clarity. So this is actually the symbol for the building bridges for integration in Chinese medicine. It used to be an event that was held every single year. I actually was a speaker at the last one, and quantum functional medicine is what I spoke about, which is basically why the invisible is visible and real. So what you see in this version of the yin yang is you see the catechus, which is the traditional symbol of Western medicine, and that's being represented in the white, the yang, the visible level of manifestation. And then this is the symbol for qi, the invisible level of things. So again, you know, without diving too deep into my side of things, I really want to toss it over to you to see what's coming up. And then we'll just kind of flow back and forth about this whole idea of the power of the invisible.
Gosh, that is so amazing.
It's right here.
You know, my studies were in physics. That's what my degree was in. And it was so interesting because we had all these mathematical formulas that described things that you could see. And I was fortunate to work in a project where you couldn't see it. You couldn't even make it yet. But you could theorize with these mathematical formulas. And what happened was, as we got to the limits of, you know, a rainbow has certain colors, right? But the energy that produces something that you can see doesn't end with red or purple. It keeps going. We know that there's infrared. We know that there's ultraviolet. You just can't see it. But we accept that, right? Because it's this. So it was super interesting because at the limits of what we could see and understand, those mathematical formulas blew up. So literally at the end of getting my degree, the professor said, so basically we don't know anything. And I was like, that's cool. And I was just thinking, like, you know, there's a debate out there about, you know, science versus faith, and they're really just two sides of the same coin, right? I mean, there's so many things out there that we can't see that we accept. And this is one of the things where this crossing over between things that are physical and things that you can see and understand helps us to have faith in the things that we can't, right? Most people don't question if I hold this up and I let go of it, it falls down.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if you think it's going to fall down, if you don't believe in gravity, it's still going to fall down. It doesn't mean that gravity's not there. So I think that's kind of what you were talking about.
Right.
And the other thing, this, okay, I can date and age myself because technology and email was just barely starting when I was back in that college days, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now this technology, people understand, people don't mind picking up one of these things, tapping on it, and seeing pictures and conversations. That's not scary.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also not visible. And I'm guessing most of us don't understand how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where, in the work that you're doing, in this healing work, I've gone from being a movement person to being some kind of a healer somehow. It was scary for me at first because I didn't know what was happening. But I was given this touchy-feely thing of movement to help people tap into that power of the invisible stuff.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's huge. God, there's so many things running through my head right
Right,
now.
I
I'm
know.
blowing up. So first of all, I did not know that you had this background in physics. And one of the really, it's no accident that Grandmaster Lou is my teacher, and it's funny because we were talking about this picture of him, which is not photoshopped. It's real. So one of the things he realized about us Westerners is it's really hard for us to grasp what we're talking about. We need to be able to wrap our hands around it. And he recognized many, many years ago that the tenets of quantum physics actually prove why what Chinese medicine is all about, this power of the invisible. So that when I talked about the quantum functional medicine, that's what I spoke about. So I talk E = MC², right? That is like the most powerful healing formula we have. Free energy can be converted into mass at the speed of light, which I say the speed of light, consciousness. So that has to do with, why does acupuncture and all of this work, it's all about having that energy be free flowing. And when you can open up the places that are stagnant and bring in free energy, then that's a natural formula that happens in all of nature. And beyond, the other piece that really, let me tap into something else too. When we think about, we were talking about devices,
Right.
And things.
Yeah.
All of this technology that we use, whether it's the cell phone, or we think about the things that we're using in Western medicine, like an MRI, or any of the imaging that we're using, is using quantum technology. But we're using like Newtonian linear ways of understanding. So we're not looking at the biggest picture of it. So that's the other piece. Like one of the things that's happening, it's I call it Breast Health Awareness Month right now, right? So when you have a mammogram, that's a picture of time and space at one moment in time, right? And that's the piece that we don't take into consideration, that it's just that one moment in time. If we were to take mammograms all day long, all of our breasts would look different because there's this other level that relates to what's happening in the energy and the function in the body. So it's so important when we look to really take a step back and look at the bigger picture of things for the highest level of health and healing, or you're really, really, really missing this opportunity to tap into the root. And especially like when we think about Breast Health Awareness Month, I mean, what is prevention? So we don't really have that concept from a linear Western standpoint, but when you open up to seeing that there is this invisible level that relates to the energy flow, that's where the true prevention lies, tapping into that.
Gosh, my head is now spinning.
Yes. Okay.
Take
you
tag.
take it. Back to you.
So a couple things you mentioned in there remind me to come back to that equation. So I actually also authored a book called Perfect 10 Posture.
Keep going.
So I've been known as like the posture girl, right? And people hear that and they sit up straight. And just like Melissa said, they are convinced that a position means good posture. Position is something static, which is just in a moment. Posture is dynamic. Posture is about how all of your pieces were designed by something greater than us, designed to fit together, to work together. If we talk just in joints, the vertebrae in our spine were designed to shape and fit a certain way and to create certain movements. And when we are talking about moving around in the world, you can't control that. That is something that is being controlled at a level that is invisible, that we don't understand. And it's very difficult sometimes, again, with our Western minds and wanting to wrap our heads around it. Sometimes I just have to say to people, just walk and stop thinking. Okay, but I should do this and I should put that there. I'm like, wow, if you're going to think about all these things and where they need to be, you're not going to be able to move. And that's why we have the body, is to get out there and to move. So the way that I teach movement is to help people to understand that sometimes we have to let go. We do some hard work and then we let go and let it happen, right? So when we get back to that, and again, the thing that's guiding us on the physical level is our brain knows exactly how things are supposed to work. It's programmed that way. It's us getting in the way of it that makes us start moving weird and start developing compensation patterns. Then we've got pain in our body, and then we don't have energy. And then we can't do these things that we want to do. If we can get back to letting the brain be in control, that's one thing. But there's a higher level of it, right? There's always a higher level of truth. Like, I don't know about you, but we both live in a house, right? You live in a house?
Live in a house.
Okay. Also true, you live in Indianapolis? Okay. Also true, you live in the United States?
I think so.
Okay, so those are 3 different statements that are all true. It's just a deeper level of truth, right? So as we think about letting go of controlling exactly how my body should be to letting the brain control movement, then there's a higher level of truth, which is letting this energy come in and control the whole vessel. So this is where we start getting into spirituality, into God energy, into universal energy. And what is that? And in the school that I work in Pranic Healing, we talk about God energy is literally that E equals MC squared, but it's minus the matter component. It's pure energy without consciousness. That is what is really driving everything we do. And so this whole concept of helping people get through worrying or having fear about the unknown or fear about this invisible thing, we can take, if we take little steps, and you can create an experiment to see, does that actually work for you? And you can repeat, just like, I'm going to drop this. I don't believe in gravity, but she told me if I let go, it's going to fall every single time. And you do that enough times, then you can have confidence that gravity exists, right? Same thing. We can take these little bitty steps. And again, I come from the world of gymnastics, so I'm so blessed more and more to have had the background of being in gymnastics for like a really, really, really long time, because we learn how to teach people to go from doing a forward roll on the floor to doing multiple flips in the air. And you can't go from one to the other with one step. You can't cross the Grand Canyon in one step. You have to take all of these little pieces. So, you know, helping people in the Western world to understand, like, why does what Melissa does work so well? That's really where we're at here, is like, okay, how can we help you at your level get comfortable with the next level of invisibility for you? And you said, you know, being able to see things, it's upgrading our phone too. Right? You will be able to see more. Yes. But you can't become a complete clairvoyant and see crazy things immediately, right? We're entitled to that. Yeah, we're entitled to that. So what's going on in your mind now, Melissa?
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that, in terms of the way I practice here, is having a framework that bridges the gap between the visible and the invisible. And there's 2 pieces. Looking at the energy lines, the meridian system, which even though they're invisible, they've been mapped, and you can see, like, wow, you know, like if somebody is having, I'll use an example of my father-in-law, I know he wouldn't mind. He had a big piece of his large intestine removed. He had colitis that got unnoticed. He had had an ostomy. So had a lot of challenges with healing that. And every fall, which is a season of the lung and large intestine, he would just get real low, like his energy would drop. And then maybe like a year or so after the surgery, he had a frozen shoulder. So I'm trying to remember where I'm going with this, but the shoulder is commanded. Oh yes, thank you. The shoulder is commanded by the large intestine meridian line, so energy line. So he had the visible space, the organ of the large intestine that was removed, which and inflamed. So he had that energy block there. He had that true visible level block there.
Mhm.
And then later on the line, it wasn't like he was pitch and ball or lifting weights or
Right.
something. All of a sudden, this frozen shoulder, there are no accidents. The energy line is directly connected to the organ system. So he had all these things show up that really reveal that. Now, to take it a step further, and I know, again, Joe, I know you're not even going to see this, but I love you. Some of your sisters may. To take it another step, so I just had, in all of my being, I was like, he should not have surgery. But all of my being said, you're not allowed to make that decision for him. He has to figure that out for himself. He had surgery, and after the surgery, he had a complete loss of function of his arm. He was not able to use his right arm at all. And that was his faith moment. That was his come to Jesus moment. He was like, all right, I will turn to literally go to God. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to go to physical therapy. I'm going to see, he saw Grandmaster Lou for a little while.
Wow.
And he really started to open up. Part of all the stuckness for him had been, there was a lot of emotional and spiritual stuff that was stuck. And when he was able to break through that, you wouldn't even know what I'm telling you right now. I mean, he has full use of his arm, and it's like I almost forget that story sometimes.
I love that. Yes. Just let that divine nectar flow in, And then it becomes, you hear those stories and you hear them over and over, and you're like, okay, let me start listening. And some people, this with kids, right? You have a lot of kids.
I do.
And so some kids, you tell them once and they got it and they listen and they follow the rules, right? Mm-hmm. Other kids have to go out and do it for themselves and break an arm and do all it. We all are like that, right? On the soul level. Like, some of us will hear it and we're like, yes, that makes sense to me. I'm going to follow the rules. And others of us really need to be beat down pretty far before we listen.
Yes, I've got the full spectrum there. So yes,
good.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's part of the piece that's so important in terms of accepting this bigger picture, the invisible and the visible. There's no rules about how you're going to do this, and having compassion for where you're at as you're opening up, because it can feel really scary if you've never opened up to this level before. It can be like, whoa! But as you do, you'll slowly what you need, like those little baby steps. What you need to see in order to open up to a higher level of faith and that connection, and how you can support yourself at that level will reveal itself.
So I'd like to give a little tidbit. So how can I get my faith moving faster? How can I have faith sooner? And this just literally happened last night in my study group, and we were discussing about faith. How do we get real true faith and not just a blind, I'm going to follow the rules faith, right? And it really requires us to stop. And somebody said a while ago, when these amazing miracles happen right in front of us, how often we go, that was unbelievable. But you saw it with your own eyes. You witnessed it. You felt it. I've even had people in my own studio who literally had a pain level go from an 8 to a 0, but yet they didn't want to continue using that tool because it was too unbelievable for them. They just used unbelievable. I'm like, but it happened. So one little tidbit, okay, 2. Maybe one little tidbit is, instead of us finding those moments where we say it's unbelievable, we go, that's awesome. Because something made it happen. There was a force that made whatever that cool thing was happen. And so if we could just stop, and instead of say it's unbelievable, because that really means it didn't happen. We stop and say, that was awesome. That was really cool. I don't understand it, but it was cool. And then also giving ourselves permission to walk around with that. I'm going to look for these cool things that are happening. I'm gonna those crazy things that were synchronous, you're thinking about somebody and they call you on the phone. Don't discount that.
Yep.
It was awesome.
That was what was coming up in my mind when you say the word, when you use unbelievable, you're discounting. So when you discount it, it shuts it down. But the more that you practice tapping into that, it literally needs to be exercised. And the more that you do that, the more the strength of that tool builds for you and how you can connect.
And trusting the people that are telling you what to do. You know what I mean? Like, if you've got somebody who you have had good results with, and they're giving you the next step, and you find yourself resisting doing that next step. Oh, yeah, well, I don't have time to do this, or I don't have time to do that, or I don't like doing it online. When you find yourself resisting, to stop and ask why, and go, well, before I discount it, let me experiment with it. Before I say no to something that somebody's asking me to do to help me feel better, I'm going to do it a few times and see what my result is. Then if it doesn't work, go ahead, get rid of it.
Right, right.
But don't discount it before you do it.
Experiment.
You know, otherwise it's yours. So there you go. Yeah,
Love
fun.
it. So I want to shift to the concept of relationships, right?
Yes.
So we've been talking about ourselves individually, but because we are these invisible energy beings. There's that field that's within us. When we are connecting in relationship, we're connecting field to field. So our field is giving off certain signals, messages, like, and you may not even visibly realize that you're saying, reject me. Go ahead, reject me. Show me I'm not worthy. Abandon me. And on the outside, you're saying, love me. Go on a date with me. Take me out to dinner. But there's another part of you, a trauma pattern, something that got stuck that is saying the opposite of that. So this is like that relationships become a way where it can really show you things that are happening at a level that you may not even be conscious of yet. And it dredges it up to the surface. So you're like, a piece of that could be the other person. But most of it is you playing it out through that relationship and that connection.
Right. And, again, I can speak from my education of energy is in that field we have certain energy bits, let's call them that, like energy bits, like a ball of energy, right? So if I have negative thoughts about myself and I'm saying to myself, oh, I'm not good enough, or, go ahead and step all over me, whatever, that energy resides in my energy field. And so as we get closer, right, most people we don't bump into so much. But when we come into a relationship and we decide we're going to be closer, then we start melting. And we tend to, like attracts like. So like you said, whatever's in my energy field is what I'm going to attract from that place. And then once those start mixing, they start expanding. It's like a snowball effect, right? So I'm sending that, and that's what I'm getting back. And so we're actually degrading each other with this invisible energy. So one of the cool things to be aware of is once you understand that concept and that back and forth, you can actually take and remove and clean those negative energies out of your field. So if you're finding yourself attracting like the same kind of person and it always has this same pattern, then what if you did healing work on your own energy field, remove some of those energy balls, and then you start attracting, but not just remove them, but replace them with something good.
Yes.
Right? Replace it with something good, and then that's what you attract. And then what are you doing? You're sharing back and forth and building this positive, this bright light, which is kind of cool.
It's really cool. It's very cool. So, so that kind of goes back full circle that to do the work in relationships, it's about doing the work on yourself and really owning that when you are seeing these patterns, what is it? What is it showing about something that's been stuck in you? That's another piece that I've been playing with energetically, knowing this shadow and light kind of interplay of things. Like if my belief has been like, I am not worthy. So, okay, I see that. And then the tricky part can become like, well, what do I do with that now that I see it? And we can get really stuck and trying to getting mad at ourselves for being stuck there. And like, I need to let go of not feeling worthy. So the shift that I've been seeing is I want to clear the way for abundant self-love. Like it's just the mirror, right? It's like what you want to replace the other energy on. So it's like you can choose to focus on the light, on the positive side as you're going through that healing process, rather than to beat up and really overly focus on the stuck balls that you're trying to transform. And you're still doing the same work that's going to create that clearing. So, I mean, anything else you want to say about that?
Well, for me, it's always been, my pattern and what I came to this world with was fear of people in general, because they were going to take advantage of me or something was going to happen. And so I made sure that like all relationship I had, that's how it went. And to not be afraid to once I let those relationships teach me something, instead of me feeling like the victim, that it happened to me and I shouldn't have had that. Once I let that penetrate and tell me something about myself and where does that fear come from, then instead of like hiding away from people, I was able to go like, oh my gosh, I kind of think I like people. And my interactions with people were all 100% about like, I get to learn something from you, and oh wait, I'm valuable. I have something to share with you too. And so to when we say to go inside and do your own work, you have to do that simultaneously with working with other people.
Yes.
You know,
yes,
and not to be afraid of what that interface is going to look like.
Not like, okay, I need to go cloister myself for
Yeah.
6 months until I figure this out and not talk to anybody at all. So I'm so excited because Paula is part of our Conscious Community Collaborative, and we have rebirthed. That's what I'm calling it. I didn't ask permission. That's what I'm calling it. And our new event that's all about relationship is happening on November 13th.
Yeah.
And it's called Let in the Light, Rewriting Your Relationship Stories Through the Language of Love. So a lot of what we've been tapping into today, we're going to be immersing ourselves in that. We're also going to be witnessing a film called Is Your Story Making You Sick?, which is a beautiful documentary that's really experiential. So through witnessing the journey of these 8 individuals as they do transform their stories that have to do with their own stuff and also in relationship, it's very empowering, and to look at it from different angles, and really from the angles of energetics and spirituality, but also from the level of a more traditional Western way of looking at trauma and healing.
Balance, man. You gotta have it all. You can't do one without the other, for sure.
So that event is actually going to be live. We're going to be at the big old barn at Baker Farmhouse. It's going to be awesome. So I will post in the comments how you can register and learn more about that. Is there anything else you would like to share about that, or anything?
Super excited to be at that event, and just working with this group of incredible people, and helping just to share what I can about how you remove some of those energies. I'm super excited about that. And
so she'll be, I know I didn't say it, she'll be one of the collaborators that's going to be bringing her piece to that event.
So just excited to see what keeps happening. There's some beautiful things that are happening in and around just from thinking about it. I love that when we tap into the invisible, it's also unlimited. And really removing those limits of what's possible is one of the most exciting things for me. And you mentioned earlier launching. I don't know why you used the word launch, but that's kind of what I do, is launch people. And so I'm so excited to be part of something and watch where it goes. Because I'm not the pilot at all. I just get to add the fuel somehow.
Right.
So.
Right. It's magic. It's magic. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody.
Awesome,
and see you soon. Right, it worked. People were... Oh.